Today, we delve into an emotional story of respect, resilience, and unexpected change. The story begins with Major General Jack Thompson, a retired U.S. Army veteran who dedicated his life to serving the nation. With a first-class ticket in hand, he was simply looking forward to a peaceful flight en route to a ceremony honoring his lifelong service. But contrary to his expectations, Jack found himself facing unwarranted judgment from a young flight attendant, Sarah Walker. This incident not only tested Jack's patience but also sparked a wave of profound change. What turned a minor event on a flight into a public outcry? And how could a seemingly small act of bias lead to such a powerful lesson for an entire system? Follow along with this meaningful story to discover how resilience, compassion, and a commitment to making things right can change everything. If you love stories about strength, fairness, and humanity, don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you won't miss the next inspiring lesson. Your support is our motivation to continue bringing deeper, more heartfelt stories in the future. How do you think you would act if you were in Jack's position? Share your thoughts in the comments below after the story ends. Before we dive into this impactful story, let us know where you're watching from. And if you find this story captivating, don't forget to hit subscribe. Dad, I've booked the ticket. First class, nothing to worry about, Ethan said, his voice filled with excitement. Jack frowned on the other end of the line. First class? Ethan, you know I don't need all that luxury. Dad, Ethan cut him off. This time, it's not about you, it's about me. I want you to be treated with the respect you deserve. After everything you've sacrificed for this country, this is the least I can do for you. Jack was silent for a moment before he sighed. All right, Ethan, I'll go. But you know I'm not fond of these flashy things, Ethan chuckled softly. I know. But sometimes, Dad, people need to see the value in you. That was Major General Jack Thompson, a seasoned veteran who had dedicated his life to serving the nation. He didn't wear a suit or casual attire like most other passengers. Instead, he chose to don his formal military uniform, a dark blue jacket crisply pressed, with bright gold epaulets on the shoulders, symbols of his rank and unwavering loyalty to his country. On his chest, medals shimmered, each one telling a story, a triumph, a memory of his years in service. Jack's left hand pulled a small black suitcase, while his right hand held tightly onto a military history book. His steps were steady and firm, as if nothing in the world could shake him. But if one looked closely, they would notice his eyes carried a rare humility, a striking contrast to the commanding presence of his military uniform. Jack was on his way to Washington, D.C., where a ceremony was being held to honor veterans who had made significant contributions to the country. For Jack, this ceremony was not something he looked forward to. He had told his son, "I don't need recognition. I was just doing my job like thousands of other soldiers." But for Ethan, his only son, this was an opportunity for the world to recognize the silent sacrifices his father and countless soldiers like him had endured. At the Skylift Airlines check-in counter, Jack stepped forward and placed his ticket and ID on the counter. The staff member, a young woman with a friendly smile, was immediately drawn to his military uniform. "Good morning, sir," she said with evident respect. "You're flying on SK-112 to Washington, D.C., correct?" Jack nodded slightly, responding with his deep, calm voice. "That's right. Here's my ticket." The young woman checked the details on her screen and then looked up with an even broader smile. "You're flying first class. Thank you for your service, General." As he entered the first-class cabin, Jack couldn't avoid the curious glances from a few other passengers. His simple appearance didn't align with the typical image of first-class travelers, who often wore expensive clothing and flashy accessories, but Jack didn't mind. He settled into his seat, placed his small bag in the overhead compartment, and opened his book to read. Less than 15 minutes after Jack had settled into his seat, a flight attendant approached. It was Sarah Walker, the attendant in charge of the first-class cabin on this flight. Sarah was known for being strict and adhering rigidly to procedures. When she saw Jack, she paused for a moment. His appearance, his silver hair, his modest uniform didn't fit the image of a typical first-class passenger she was accustomed to serving. The more she looked at him, the more she felt something was off. A thought flickered through her mind. Does he really belong in first class? Pausing for a few seconds, she continued walking as if nothing had happened. But the doubt in her mind kept growing. Sarah felt an urge to double-check. She turned back and stopped in front of Jack Thompson's seat. She offered a faint smile, trying to keep her voice polite, but there was an unmistakable stiffness in her tone. "Excuse me, sir," she began. "May I check your ticket, please?" Jack looked up from his book. His deep, calm eyes met hers, as if silently questioning the reason for her unexpected request. But he said nothing, nodding slightly as he reached into his coat pocket and handed her the ticket. "Of course," he said, his voice steady and composed. Sarah took the ticket, glanced at it, and then checked it on her handheld device. First class, valid. There was absolutely nothing wrong with the booking information. Yet the contrast between his modest appearance and what she typically saw from first-class passengers still left her uneasy. "Thank you, sir," she said, handing the ticket back. "Everything seems to be in order." Jack accepted the ticket, gave a polite nod, and returned to his book. Sarah continued moving through the other seats, but she couldn't shake the unease inside her. There was something about this man, his formal uniform, his unusually calm demeanor, that felt out of place. Could there have been some kind of mistake during the booking process? She wasn't sure, but the lingering doubt gnawed at her, urging her to investigate further. A few minutes later, as Jack remained focused on his book, he became aware of Sarah standing beside him again. This time, her expression no longer held the polite professionalism from before. Instead, her gaze was stern, almost cold. "Sir," Sarah began, her voice now lacking the softness it had before, "I'm afraid there might have been a mistake. This seat is not suitable for you." Jack looked up, his eyebrows slightly furrowed. He set his book down on his lap and tilted his head slightly, as if to confirm he had heard her correctly. "Not suitable? What do you mean by that?" Sarah hesitated for a brief moment under his sharp gaze, but she quickly regained her composure. "We've double-checked the information," she said, her tone steady. "It appears that your ticket doesn't match this seat. I'm afraid I'll have to ask you to move to the economy cabin." Jack remained silent for a few seconds, his eyes fixed on Sarah's face. Without speaking, his expression alone conveyed a quiet but undeniable pressure that made her uncomfortable. "My ticket was confirmed at check-in," Jack said, his voice calm yet firm. "There is no mistake here." Sarah bit her lip but didn't back down. "Sir, this is our standard procedure to ensure accuracy in seat assignments. I hope you understand." Jack took a deep breath, his eyes momentarily reflecting a hint of frustration before he regained his composure. He wasn't the kind of man to lose his temper easily. Over the years, he had learned to remain calm in all situations, whether on the battlefield or in moments of perceived injustice like this. "Very well," he said, his voice low and measured. "If you believe I don't belong here, I'll comply with your request." Jack carefully closed his book and placed it in his bag. He stood up, adjusted his uniform, and retrieved his suitcase from the overhead compartment. The entire first-class cabin seemed to fall silent. A few passengers turned to look, their gazes filled with curiosity, while some even displayed visible confusion. Though Jack said nothing, a quiet sense of hurt weighed on him. But as a soldier, he had always believed that sometimes silence is the most powerful weapon. The first-class cabin grew quieter after Jack Thompson left, but the air carried a subtle unease that most people didn't consciously notice. Sarah Walker continued her duties with an outward calm, but deep down she felt a slight sense of uneasiness. She couldn't quite explain why, but asking Jack to leave his first-class seat seemed to have left a strange, lingering impression. Nearby, Michael Harper, a successful entrepreneur in the tech industry, lowered his business magazine and fixed his sharp gaze on Jack Thompson's retreating figure as the older man quietly exited the first-class cabin. Michael wasn't the type to get involved in other people's matters, but what had just happened unsettled him enough to make him take notice. Michael had often heard Ethan Thompson, one of his closest friends, talk about his father. In many conversations, Ethan would speak with pride about the man he described as a great father, a soldier, a leader, and a teacher who had instilled in him valuable lessons about loyalty, duty, and humility. "My father doesn't need titles or glory, you understand? All he needs is to know that he fulfilled his duty as a soldier," Ethan had once told Michael. Watching Jack leave his first-class seat immediately connected the dots in Michael's mind. There was no mistaking it, the man who had just been asked to move was Jack Thompson. Michael turned to the flight attendant, Sarah, who was now serving drinks to other passengers. His voice was calm, but it carried an unmistakable firmness. "Excuse me, miss, I just saw you ask the passenger in seat 2A to move to economy. What happened?" Sarah hesitated slightly but quickly regained her professional demeanor. Yes, Mr. Harper, I was just conducting a ticket check and found that the seat was not suitable for him. It's a standard verification process. Michael frowned. Not suitable? He had a first-class ticket. Sarah maintained her rigid tone. I believe there may have been an error during the booking process. We need to ensure everything is in proper order. Michael didn't say anything further, but he knew without a doubt that this wasn't about a booking error. It was a misjudgment based purely on Jack's appearance. He studied Sarah's expression for a long moment, as if committing it to memory, then sat back in his seat, pulled out his phone, and immediately texted Ethan. On the other side of the country, Ethan Thompson was in the middle of an important meeting at his office in New York. His phone buzzed repeatedly, and when he saw Michael Harper's name flashing on the screen, he frowned slightly. Michael rarely called during work hours. Ethan signaled to his colleagues to pause the meeting and stepped out into the hallway to take the call. Michael, what's going on? I'm busy. Michael's voice cut in, urgent and serious. Ethan, this can't wait. Your father, Jack Thompson, is on the same flight as me, and I just saw him being asked to leave his first-class seat and move to economy. Ethan froze. What are you talking about? My father has a first-class ticket. I booked it myself. That's right, but the flight attendant didn't seem to think so. They checked his ticket and then, inexplicably, told him to move to economy. Your dad didn't make a fuss. He just quietly gathered his things and left. Anger surged through Ethan. He knew his father a calm and composed man who carried himself with dignity. If Jack hadn't reacted, it wasn't because he agreed with what had happened, but because he didn't want to escalate the situation unnecessarily. I'm going to handle this right now, Ethan said coldly. Can you send me the flight number? Michael quickly recited the flight number. Ethan jotted it down, then hung up and immediately contacted the airline's customer service department. At the Skylift Airlines customer service desk, a representative answered the call. A polite female voice came through the line. Thank you for calling Skylift Airlines customer support. How can I assist you today? Ethan kept his voice calm, but each word carried the weight of a command. This is Ethan Thompson, and I need you to address an urgent issue on Skylift Flight SK112 from Texas to Washington, D.C. My father, Jack Thompson, a retired Major General, has just been asked to leave his first-class seat without any legitimate reason. The representative paused for a moment to take notes, then responded. Mr. Thompson, I'm very sorry to hear about this incident. I'll contact the flight crew immediately to check on the situation and address it. Don't just check, Ethan said, his tone growing firmer. I want you to take immediate action and instruct the crew to return my father to his rightful first-class seat. If you fail to do so, I will escalate this matter to higher levels and involve my legal team. Your actions haven't just disrespected a passenger, they've insulted a veteran who has dedicated his life to serving this country. The tension in the representative's voice was clear. Yes, sir, I understand the seriousness of this situation. Please hold for a few minutes while I contact the flight crew immediately. In the flight attendant's break area, Sarah Walker was reviewing the passenger list when the sound of the intercom phone ringing shattered the quiet. She picked up the receiver and pressed it to her ear. Sarah Walker speaking. The sharp and serious voice of the head of customer service, Linda Hall, came through. Ms. Walker, this is Linda Hall from Skylift's customer service headquarters. We've just received a serious complaint regarding your actions toward passenger Jack Thompson, a retired United States Army Major General. Please explain why you asked him to leave his first-class seat. Sarah felt her heart stop for a moment. She stammered, Ms. Hall, I felt that the passenger didn't belong in that seat. I thought there might have been an error during the booking process. Linda interrupted her, her tone growing even colder. You know his ticket was completely valid. Do you even know who he is? He's not just an ordinary passenger, he's a national hero. Your actions not only caused injustice but also gravely insulted his honor. We demand that you return Mr. Thompson to his rightful seat immediately and personally apologize to him. Sarah felt her throat go dry, her hands trembling as she hung up the phone. She was beginning to realize that her mistake wasn't just a minor incident, it had become a serious problem. The injustice done to Jack Thompson had left Michael unable to stay silent. He stood up not just to defend a soldier but to question how people treat one another. Would Michael's courage and determination be enough to bring about change? Or would he face obstacles from the system? The pursuit of justice was just starting to heat up. Don't miss the developments ahead, where one small action could lead to monumental change. Share your thoughts in the comments and stay tuned for the next chapter. Sarah Walker stepped out of the flight attendant's break area, her face clearly showing signs of worry. Her hands still trembled slightly as she walked into the economy cabin. Her eyes scanned the rows of seats, searching for Jack Thompson, the man she had wronged with her poor judgment just moments ago. He wasn't hard to spot. Jack was seated near the back of the plane in a cramped economy seat. He didn't look upset, nor did he complain. Instead, he sat quietly with his military history book open, his calm demeanor underscored by an air of dignity and authority. Sarah swallowed hard. This was no ordinary passenger. This was a retired United States Army Major General, a man who had served and protected his country, a man who didn't deserve to be treated unfairly like this. She stopped in front of Jack's row, feeling as though thousands of eyes from other passengers were fixed on her. Some of them had witnessed the earlier incident, and now they watched Sarah with a mix of curiosity and silent judgment. Jack looked up from his book as he noticed her presence. Though he didn't say a word, his calm gaze seemed to quietly expect an explanation. "Mr. Thompson," Sarah began, trying to keep her voice steady, though it was clear she was nervous. I want to sincerely apologize for what happened earlier. I made a mistake. Your ticket is completely valid, and you have every right to sit in first class." Jack closed his book and placed it on the small tray table in front of him. He remained silent for a moment, as though carefully considering his response. Then, in a deep, steady voice, he spoke, "Ms. Walker, I am not someone who easily holds grudges over minor mistakes, but your actions today were more than just an error in your work. They reflect how you perceive and judge others." Sarah felt frozen in place. She couldn't defend herself, because she knew he was right. Jack continued, "I have spent my life serving this country not for recognition or accolades, but because it was my duty. And your duty, as a flight attendant, is to treat every passenger with fairness and respect, regardless of how they look or who they are. This isn't about rank or power. It's about respect." Sarah lowered her head, unable to meet his firm, piercing gaze. "You're absolutely right, Mr. Thompson. I allowed unconscious biases to cloud my judgment. I deeply regret my actions, and I hope you can accept my apology." Jack looked at her for a long moment, then finally gave a slight nod. "You've recognized your mistake, and that's what matters. But what you do next is what truly counts." Sarah looked up, sensing the forgiveness in his words, but she also knew that she would need to do much more to make things right. Sarah quickly arranged for Jack to return to his first-class seat. She personally carried his bag as a gesture of atonement. When Jack stepped back into the first-class cabin, the other passengers' eyes immediately turned toward him. Some appeared surprised, while others smiled in approval, as if they felt justice had been restored. Michael Harper, sitting a few rows away, gave Jack a small nod as he walked past. When Jack settled back into his seat, Michael leaned forward and spoke quietly to him. "Mr. Thompson, I've already informed Ethan about what happened. He's handling the matter from his end." Jack gave Michael a small smile and nodded in thanks. "You're a friend of Ethan's." "Yes, we're close friends. And I have to say, Ethan is incredibly proud of you," Michael replied. Jack said nothing more, but there was a quiet glimmer of pride in his eyes for his son. While Jack had returned to his first-class seat, Sarah Walker couldn't breathe a sigh of relief just yet. Back in the flight attendant's break area, she received another call from headquarters. This time, the voice on the other end belonged to Richard Hale, Skylift Airline CEO. His tone was cold and stern, carrying an intensity Sarah had never experienced before. "Ms. Walker, this is Richard Hale, CEO of Skylift Airlines. I've received a direct report from the customer service team. Do you realize the seriousness of the consequences your actions have caused?" Sarah felt her throat go dry. "Mr. Hale, I've realized my mistake and have already returned Mr. Thompson to his first-class seat." "Returning him to his seat is only the first step," Richard said, his tone growing even colder. "Do you even know who he is? He's not just any passenger, he's a national hero, a retired Major General of the United States Army. And it doesn't matter who he is, every passenger deserves respect. Your actions didn't just insult him, they've damaged the reputation of this airline." Sarah swallowed hard, unable to muster a response. Richard continued. When the plane lands, you will remain behind to provide a detailed report on this incident. And let me be clear, we are considering severe disciplinary actions. This is not just a lesson for you, but for our entire team." The call ended, leaving Sarah standing frozen in the break area, the weight of the situation pressing heavily on her shoulders. In his office, Ethan received a message from Michael. Jack has been returned to first class. They've apologized to him. Ethan felt a slight sense of relief, but knew this incident couldn't simply end there. As a businessman, he understood the importance of building and protecting one's reputation, and more than anyone, he knew his father deserved respect. Ethan picked up his phone and sent an email to Linda Hall, Skylift's head of customer service. "Thank you for addressing the issue on flight SK112. However, I would like a detailed report on the actions Skylift plans to take to prevent similar incidents in the future. I hope this will be an opportunity for Skylift to improve its service, not just for my father but for all passengers." The confrontation between Sarah and Jack was not just an incident on a flight, it was a reflection of the biases that exist in society. Sarah had made a mistake, but would she have the courage to face the consequences? And Jack, with his calm demeanor and forgiving nature, how would he handle the situation moving forward? Tensions were beginning to simmer. Don't miss the dramatic turning points in the next installment, where truth and dignity will be put to the test. Share your thoughts in the comments and stay tuned for the next chapter. The plane continued gliding through the clear blue sky, its engines producing a steady hum. In the first-class cabin, Jack Thompson had returned to his seat, but the earlier incident still left an unpleasant aftertaste. Though Jack tried to maintain his composure, he couldn't ignore the feeling of having been treated unfairly. For a soldier who had faced life-and-death situations, being misjudged simply for his unassuming appearance was something he couldn't easily brush aside. Michael Harper, seated a few rows away from Jack, watched him discreetly. Michael understood that this incident was not just a minor mistake. It was a larger lesson not just for Sarah Walker but for the entire Skylift Airline system. He recalled the look in Sarah's eyes when she had asked Jack to leave his seat. It wasn't a look of malice, but of bias, a deep-seated bias that many people fail to recognize within themselves. While the passengers were relaxing, in the cockpit, Captain Daniel Reeves, a seasoned pilot with over 20 years of experience, received an unusual notification from the airline's ground customer service department. An urgent message flashed on the plane's internal communication screen, requesting the flight crew to immediately contact Skylift Airlines headquarters. Daniel Reeves pressed the communication button and put on his headset. The voice of Linda Hall, head of customer service, came through, calm but serious. "Captain Reeves, I need to confirm that you are aware of an incident involving passenger Jack Thompson in the first-class cabin of this flight." Daniel frowned slightly, flipping through the notes in the flight logbook. He hadn't been informed of any significant issues. "I haven't received any reports from the cabin crew. What happened?" Linda provided a brief explanation. "One of your flight attendants, Sarah Walker, asked Mr. Thompson, a retired United States Army Major General, to leave his first-class seat without a valid reason. The passenger has since been returned to his seat. But this situation is drawing strong reactions from the airline's leadership. We need to ensure that no further issues arise during this flight." Daniel Reeves furrowed his brow. As a former military pilot himself before transitioning to commercial aviation, Daniel understood the respect owed to service members. He took a deep breath and said, "Thank you for the information, Linda. I'll address this immediately." When the call ended, Daniel activated the internal communication system and summoned Sarah Walker to the cockpit. Sarah Walker entered the cockpit with a tense expression. She knew that a call from the captain was not a good sign. Captain Daniel Reeves swiveled his chair around, fixing her with a sharp gaze. "Sarah, I just received a report from headquarters. Did you ask a first-class passenger to leave their seat without a valid reason?" Sarah lowered her head, her voice shaky. "Yes, Captain. But I corrected the mistake and returned him to his first-class seat. I realize now that I was wrong." Daniel frowned, his tone turning stern. "Do you know who that passenger is?" "That's Major General Jack Thompson, a man who not only represents the military but also embodies national pride. Asking him to leave his seat was not just a personal insult to him, it damaged the reputation of this airline." "This is no small matter, Sarah." Each of Daniel's words hit Sarah like a powerful blow. She knew she had made a mistake, but now she realized it was far greater than she had imagined. Daniel continued, "But this isn't just about Jack Thompson. It's about how you assess people. I don't ever want to see any passenger, no matter who they are, treated with such disrespect. As a flight attendant, your responsibility is to ensure comfort and fairness for everyone." Sarah nodded, her eyes welling up with tears, though she fought to keep them from falling. "Captain, I'm deeply regretful. I'm ready to take full responsibility." Daniel took a deep breath. "Do your job well for the remainder of this flight. But once we land, I'll be submitting a full report on this incident. This isn't just a lesson for you, it's a lesson for our entire team." Sarah bowed her head and left the cockpit. Inside her, guilt and fear intertwined, but there was also a faint resolve she knew she had to change. When Sarah returned to the first-class cabin, she saw Jack Thompson reading his book. His gaze no longer carried the sharpness from before. Determined to confront her mistake head-on, she decided to approach him and gave a slight bow. "Mr. Thompson," she said softly, "I want to thank you for accepting my apology. You were right. What I do next is what truly matters." Jack looked up, offering a faint smile. "Mess Walker, I don't expect perfection from anyone. We're all human, and humans make mistakes. But what I learned in the military is that mistakes must become opportunities for growth." Sarah nodded. His words, though not harsh, carried a weight heavier than any reprimand could. Meanwhile, Ethan Thompson received an email response from Linda Hall, head of customer service. The email assured him that Skylift Airlines would conduct an internal investigation and implement measures to prevent similar incidents in the future. Ethan read the email with some satisfaction. But he knew that promises alone weren't enough. He immediately replied, "Thank you for your response, Linda. However, I would like to see a concrete action plan and a timeline for implementing the improvements, if Skylift is truly serious. I expect to see clear results within the next 30 days. This isn't just about my father, it's about ensuring that every passenger receives the respect they deserve on every Skylift flight." Ethan understood that the fight for fairness was never a short sprint. He was ready to invest the time needed to ensure that this story wouldn't just be a personal lesson but a meaningful catalyst for change. As Flight SK-112 slowly touched down at Washington, D.C. International Airport, the tension within the cabin seemed to subside. The sound of the announcement system echoed, signaling passengers to prepare to disembark. But for some, this was not the end of their journey, it was merely the beginning of the consequences they would soon face. Jack Thompson quietly retrieved his carry-on luggage and stepped out of the first-class cabin. His calm demeanor concealed a complex mix of emotions, not anger, but disappointment. To him, this incident wasn't merely a personal inconvenience, it was a reflection of a deeper issue, the lack of basic respect that biases could inflict. In the VIP lounge of the airport, Skylift Airlines' leadership team had gathered in full force, including CEO Richard Hale, head of customer service Linda Hall, and several senior executives. They all understood that if the situation wasn't handled properly, it could erupt into a massive media storm. Linda Hall held a file in her hands, her face showing clear concern. "Richard, we need to resolve this matter in the most satisfactory way possible. Mr. Thompson is not just a retired major general, he's a symbol of the United States military. If this story gets out, Skylift's reputation will take a major hit." Richard Hale, his expression tense, nodded. "I understand the gravity of this situation. We not only need to apologize to him, but we must also implement immediate corrective measures. Jack Thompson isn't the kind of person to let this go, and I doubt his son, Ethan Thompson, will either." Linda frowned slightly. "I've received an email from Ethan. He's demanding a concrete action plan within the next 30 days. I have no doubt he'll monitor every step we take very closely." Richard leaned back in his chair and sighed. "We have no choice but to deliver. But first, I need to meet with Jack Thompson as soon as he disembarks. This is not the time to avoid accountability." At the arrival gate, Ethan Thompson stood waiting for his father, accompanied by a small team from the law firm he had hired to provide support if necessary. His face showed a mixture of worry and determination. Although Ethan deeply respected his father's composure, he couldn't tolerate the thought of him being treated unfairly. "Where is he?" Ethan turned to Michael Harper, his friend who had just landed and joined him at the gate. Michael glanced at his watch. "They're disembarking now. He should be here in just a few minutes." Finally, the figure of Jack Thompson appeared at the exit. His posture was upright, and his calm demeanor remained unshaken, even after enduring such an unpleasant incident. Ethan quickly walked toward his father, grasping his hand firmly. Dad, Ethan said, his concern evident in his eyes. Are you okay? I've heard everything that happened. They had no right to treat you that way. Jack lightly patted his son's shoulder and smiled. I'm fine, Ethan. Don't make this into more than it needs to be. But I hope you understand that this isn't just about me, it's about how people treat one another. Ethan nodded, but his eyes still burned with determination. I know, and that's why I'm going to make sure they change. As Jack and Ethan entered the VIP lounge, Richard Hale and Linda Hall immediately stood up. Both tried to maintain their composure, but the tension in the room was unmistakable. Richard stepped forward, extending his hand. Mr. Thompson, I'm Richard Hale, the CEO of Skylift Airlines. First and foremost, I want to offer my sincerest apologies for what happened on your flight. This was unacceptable, and I assure you we will take the necessary steps to ensure it never happens again. Jack shook his hand, his expression serious but not angry. I appreciate your apology, Mr. Hale, but remember, an apology only means something if it's followed by real action. I don't want anyone else to go through what I experienced, no matter who they are or where they're sitting. Richard nodded, appearing slightly relieved that Jack wasn't reacting more harshly. But Ethan wasn't ready to let it go so easily. He spoke up, his voice firm and direct. Mr. Hale, your apology isn't enough to fix this. I want to know exactly what Skylift plans to do to repair its system, from staff training to how complaints are handled. This isn't the first time I've heard of an incident like this, but I hope it will be the last. Linda Hall stepped in, her tone calm but resolute. We've already started drafting a comprehensive reform plan, which includes unconscious bias training sessions for all Skylift employees. Additionally, we're revising our complaint handling process to ensure every customer is treated fairly and respectfully. Ethan frowned. I want to see the detailed plan within 7 days. If not, we'll be discussing this on a different platform, be it through the media or the courts. Richard nodded, clearly feeling the weight of Ethan's words. We'll have the detailed plan sent to you as soon as possible. And once again, Mr. Thompson, I promise you Skylift will change. Jack smiled faintly and placed a hand on his son's shoulder. Ethan, let's give them the chance to follow through on what they've promised. True change takes time, we don't need to rush it. Meanwhile, in another Skylift meeting room at the airport, Sarah Walker sat across from an internal review panel. Mark Greaves, the head of HR, was reviewing the report on the incident. Sarah, Mark said, his voice firm, your actions not only violated company policy but also caused significant damage to our reputation. This is something that cannot be overlooked. Sarah lowered her head, her voice choked with emotion. Mr. Greaves, I know I was wrong. I allowed unconscious biases to influence how I judged a passenger. I deeply regret my actions and am willing to take full responsibility. Mark looked at her for a long moment before saying, you will be temporarily suspended and required to participate in a mandatory training program on unconscious bias and customer handling. This is your chance to make things right. But remember, you won't get this opportunity a second time. Sarah nodded, her eyes brimming with tears. Though the disciplinary action weighed heavily on her, she knew she needed to face her mistake to become a better person. That evening, Ethan and Jack sat together in a small cafe near the airport. Ethan gazed at his father, his face thoughtful. Dad, I'm going to make sure they keep their promise. I won't let this stop at just an apology. Jack took a sip of his coffee, his eyes distant. Ethan, you're doing the right thing. But remember, change doesn't happen overnight. If you can push them to fix their system, then you've accomplished something truly meaningful. Ethan smiled. I'm not doing this just for you, Dad. I'm doing this for everyone who deserves to be treated with respect. Jack looked at his son, proud but silent. Under the warm glow of the cafe lights, 2 men, a soldier and a businessman, sat ready to face the challenges ahead, ensuring this story wouldn't be forgotten. Washington, D.C. Airport wasn't just the end of Flight SK-112's journey, it was the starting point of a tough battle between justice and injustice. With public pressure mounting and Ethan Thompson's resolve unwavering, Skylift Airlines would have no choice but to deliver meaningful answers. But would that be enough to restore Jack's honor? Don't miss the dramatic twists in the next installment, where the truth will continue to unfold and major changes await. Leave your thoughts in the comments and hit the subscribe button to support us. Join us as we follow this compelling story to its conclusion. A week after the incident on Flight SK-112, Skylift Airlines officially issued an internal announcement about the launch of a comprehensive customer service reform plan. The email was sent to all employees, from senior leadership to flight attendants, ground staff, and flight crews. The subject line read, "Commitment from Skylift Airlines, we must change for the better." At Skylift Airlines' New York office, Linda Hall received a response email from Ethan Thompson. Its contents were unsurprising but carried enough weight to make her and her team feel the pressure from him. Dear MS. Linda Hall, I have received the announcement regarding Skylift's reform plan. However, these commitments must be translated into concrete actions. I expect to receive a progress report within the next 30 days, detailing achieved objectives and specific changes. If no tangible actions are evident, my legal team and I will not hesitate to leverage media and legal channels to ensure Skylift is held accountable. Sincerely, Ethan Thompson. Linda sighed and set her coffee cup down on the table. She knew Ethan was not the kind of person to issue idle threats. As a successful young entrepreneur, Ethan had enough influence to turn this story into a full-blown media storm. Linda immediately called for a meeting with the senior management team. In the conference room, the tension was palpable. Richard Hale, the CEO, looked directly at Linda and asked, "Are we prepared to handle Ethan? I don't want to see any missteps in this plan." Linda nodded, her tone resolute. "We've already started implementing training sessions for our employees. I'm also working with unconscious bias experts to design a practical and impactful program. Additionally, we're overhauling the customer complaint handling process. We have 30 days to prove that Skylift is truly committed to change." Richard didn't respond, but the worry in his eyes was unmistakable. He knew that Ethan wasn't just demanding improvements, he wanted Skylift to prove that the airline was capable of maintaining the trust of its customers. At a Skylift Airlines training center in Denver, Sarah Walker began her first day of mandatory training. She walked into the classroom with a heavy heart. Around her were more than 20 other employees, flight attendants, ticket counter staff, and a few customer service representatives. All of them had been required to attend this program as part of Skylift's reform efforts. The instructor for the session was Dr. Amanda Lee, an expert in unconscious bias and customer communication skills. With her silver hair and calm, resonant voice, Amanda quickly captured the attention of the room. "Welcome to the course on identifying and overcoming bias in customer service. Today, we're going to take a hard look at our decisions and analyze how unconscious biases may have influenced the way we treat others." Sarah sat in the second row, feeling uneasy. She knew that she was one of those under the most scrutiny. Amanda started by showing a short video that illustrated how service industry employees often made judgments about customers based on their appearance. The video ended with a striking question. Do you truly know your customers, or are you seeing them through the lens of your biases? The room fell silent. Sarah felt a wave of guilt rise within her. She recalled the moment she asked Jack Thompson to leave his first-class seat, simply because he didn't look like the other passengers in the cabin. At the time, she had believed she was doing the right thing, but now she realized how wrong she had been. Amanda walked around the room, looking at each participant with a serious but non-judgmental gaze. Finally, she stopped in front of Sarah. "Ms. Walker, would you be willing to share your experience? I understand you recently encountered a significant situation." Sarah swallowed nervously, then nodded. "Yes, I made a big mistake. I asked a passenger, someone with a valid ticket, to leave his first-class seat because I didn't think he belonged there. I've come to realize that my judgment was entirely based on personal bias." Amanda gave a small, understanding smile, though her tone remained serious. "Recognizing a mistake is the first step, but what's more important is what you've learned from it. What do you think needs to change in how you view and handle situations?" Sarah was silent for a moment before answering. "I think I need to learn to see people for who they truly are, not through the lens of assumptions. I need to remember that every customer deserves respect." Amanda nodded. "Exactly. And it's not just about customers. Everyone deserves to be treated fairly. Remember, customer service isn't just about following protocols. It's about building trust." As Skylift began rolling out its reform plans, Jack and Ethan quietly monitored every development. Jack didn't talk much about the incident, but he always listened carefully whenever Ethan shared updates. One evening, as the two were having dinner at Ethan's home, Ethan handed his father a new document from Skylift. Dad, they just sent over their first progress report. They're rolling out training programs and have updated their complaint handling process. I think they're really trying. Jack skimmed through the document, then looked up at his son. It's a good start, but you know what really matters isn't what they say in the first week, it's whether they can sustain it for years to come. Ethan nodded. I understand. I'll keep following up. But don't worry, Dad. I won't let them get away with just empty promises. Inside Skylift, the changes weren't just affecting employees, they were also stirring unease among some of the leadership team. A few believed that Ethan Thompson was putting too much pressure on the company, while others saw it as an opportunity to rebuild customer trust. Linda Hall held a meeting with the entire leadership team. Standing in front of a whiteboard, she wrote the phrase "change or be replaced." We don't have any other choice, Linda said. If we don't improve our service, we'll lose our customers, not just people like Jack Thompson, but everyone who's watching this story unfold. Richard Hale, the CEO, nodded in agreement. Ethan Thompson is a challenge, but he's also an opportunity. If we truly commit to change, this could be a turning point for Skylift. Just days after Skylift Airlines rolled out its reform plan, the story of the incident involving Major General Jack Thompson began spreading rapidly on social media. A passenger on flight SK112 had posted a detailed account of how Jack was asked to leave his first-class seat and move to economy. The post quickly gained thousands of shares and comments. One excerpt from the passenger's post was widely circulated. The elderly man sat quietly in the economy cabin, not saying a word despite being treated unfairly. But what shocked me most was when I learned who he was. Major General Jack Thompson, a national hero. How could someone who spent his life serving this country be treated like this? Skylift Airlines needs to answer for this. The comments under the post were filled with outrage. This is such an insult to a national hero. Skylift Airlines needs to take responsibility. They should retrain their entire staff. Why are we still seeing bias-driven actions like this in 2024? The story quickly became a hot topic, attracting attention from journalists and social media influencers. Many veterans organizations also spoke out, demanding that Skylift Airlines provide a public explanation and apology. At his office, Ethan Thompson read through the articles and social media comments. He knew the situation had spiraled beyond Skylift's control and was now a public matter. Michael Harper, his close friend, walked into the office with a half smirk. Have you seen this? Michael asked, pointing to Ethan's laptop screen. The story is spreading faster than we ever expected. Skylift is being backed into a corner. Ethan didn't respond right away. He understood that public pressure could be a double-edged sword. On one hand, it forced Skylift to act more swiftly and decisively. But on the other, if not handled properly, it could escalate the story into an even bigger crisis. Michael, Ethan said, I don't want them to just issue a public apology and consider it done. I want them to actually change from the ground up. Michael nodded. So, what's your next move? Ethan thought for a moment. I'm going to hold a press conference. We need to make our position clear, not just about my father, but about how Skylift and businesses in general must change the way they treat their customers. This isn't just about one person. At Skylift Airlines headquarters, Richard Hale received the latest media report from the PR team. The opening section of the report read, there have been over 15,000 posts and comments related to the incident involving Mr. Jack Thompson on flight SK112. Of these, 80% are negative and pose a significant threat to the company's reputation. The story is now being discussed on major media outlets, including CNN, The New York Times, and The Washington Post. Richard put the report down on the table and sighed deeply. He turned to Linda Hall. We're facing a media storm. If we don't handle this properly, it could be a fatal blow to Skylift. Linda nodded, maintaining her composure. I've been in discussions with the PR team. We need to issue a public apology, but at the same time, we must announce a detailed reform plan. This isn't just about fixing a single incident, it's about proving that we are serious about change. Richard leaned back in his chair, deep in thought. Ethan Thompson is watching this closely. He's not the type to be satisfied with a superficial apology. We need to do something groundbreaking. Linda suggested, we should invite Mr. Jack Thompson to participate in the reform process, or at the very least, offer him a seat on an advisory board. That would send a strong message that Skylift isn't just making amends, but actively listening to those affected. Richard considered her suggestion for a moment, then nodded. All right, arrange a direct meeting with him. But first, make sure our public apology is flawless. A few days later, Ethan held a press conference at a conference center in Washington, D.C. The event attracted numerous reporters, journalists, and representatives from various organizations. Ethan stood on the stage, a large screen behind him displaying the words, "Respect is a right, not a privilege." Ethan began his speech by recounting his father's story. "My father, Major General Jack Thompson, is not someone who seeks attention. He has always worked quietly, dedicating his life to protecting this country. But on Skylift Airlines flight SK-112, he was treated unfairly simply because of his modest appearance." He looked directly at the audience, his gaze resolute. "But this story isn't just about my father. It's the story of millions of other people who have been judged and treated unfairly simply because they didn't fit the image someone thought they should have. It's time for us to change." Ethan went on to outline specific demands for Skylift Airlines and called on other businesses to improve how they treat their customers. He concluded with a powerful statement: "We cannot change the past, but we can shape the future. And that future must be built on fairness and respect." His speech was met with thunderous applause from the audience. Following Ethan's press conference, Skylift Airlines wasted no time taking action. Linda Hall personally called Jack Thompson, inviting him to join the airline's newly formed advisory board, a group established to oversee customer service reforms and ensure that meaningful changes were made. During the call, Linda said, "General Thompson, we believe your experience and integrity will bring tremendous value to Skylift. We want you to help us build a customer service system that is fair and transparent." Jack was silent for a moment, then replied in his deep, steady voice, "I'm not doing this for Skylift. I'm doing this for people like me, people who might not have the chance to speak up." Linda felt a wave of relief. Jack Thompson had agreed. Elsewhere, Sarah Walker had completed her unconscious bias training. She left the classroom feeling lighter but also determined. Sarah understood that recognizing her mistakes was only the first step. What mattered more was ensuring she acted in a way that would never repeat them. Sarah was called back to work, but this time she was given a new role, mentoring younger flight attendants on how to serve customers with respect and fairness. "Dear Major General Jack Thompson, my name is Sarah Walker, the flight attendant who served you on Skylift Airlines flight SK-112. I am writing this letter to offer my deepest and most sincere apology for my actions on that flight. As I reflect on my behavior, I realize how profoundly wrong I was. My actions were not only unprofessional but also deeply disrespectful to you, a man who has served this country with honor and dedication. That day, I allowed unconscious biases to cloud my judgment and failed to see the person behind the uniform. For that, I am truly sorry. Since that incident, I have taken part in extensive training on unconscious bias in customer service, but more importantly, I have taken the time to confront my own assumptions and prejudices. I've come to understand that respect and fairness must be at the core of everything we do, regardless of someone's appearance or background. Meeting someone like you should have been a moment of honor for me. Yet I failed to recognize it at the time. I can only hope that through my actions moving forward, I can demonstrate that I've learned from my mistakes. I also want to thank you, not just for your service to this nation, but for the grace and dignity you showed during and after that flight. Your calmness in the face of such treatment has left a deep impression on me, and it has motivated me to become not only a better professional but a better person. I understand if forgiveness is not something that comes easily, but I hope that one day you might consider accepting my apology. Thank you for teaching me a lesson I will carry with me for the rest of my life. With the deepest respect and regret, Sarah Walker. Sarah printed the letter, signed it by hand, and placed it in an envelope. She asked Skylift's leadership to deliver it to Jack Thompson personally, ensuring he received it. A week later, Sarah received a short response. It was a handwritten note from Jack Thompson himself. "Dear M.S. Walker, thank you for your letter. It takes courage to admit one's mistakes, and even greater courage to take steps to correct them. I appreciate your apology and the efforts you've made to learn from this experience. As a soldier, I have always believed that growth often comes from challenges and failures. I am glad to see that you have embraced this opportunity to grow. I accept your apology. May this experience guide you in serving others with fairness and respect in the future. Sincerely, by Jack Thompson." The note was brief, but it carried immense weight. Sarah felt a wave of relief and gratitude wash over her. She knew she could not undo the past, but she could choose how she would act moving forward. The story of Flight SK-112, though born out of a moment of injustice, became a catalyst for lasting change at Skylift Airlines, for Sarah Walker, and for everyone who learned of the incident. It served as a reminder that even in our darkest moments, there is an opportunity to grow, to heal, and to build a better future grounded in respect and understanding. This marked a new chapter for Skylift Airlines' Jack Thompson and Sarah Walker. It was a story of mistakes made, lessons learned, and the enduring hope that true change is always possible. If this story resonated with you, don't forget to share it with others. And if you want to see more stories like this, please hit the subscribe button and support our channel. Your engagement motivates us to continue sharing stories that inspire and uplift. Thank you, dear Mr. Thompson. I made a serious mistake by allowing unconscious biases to cloud my judgment. I failed in my responsibility as someone in the service industry to treat every passenger with fairness and respect, especially someone like you, who has dedicated your entire life to this country. Over the past few weeks, I've spent a great deal of time reflecting on what happened that day and have participated in the training sessions Skylift organized. But more than what I learned from the materials, it was your calmness and grace that taught me the greatest lesson. Instead of reacting in anger, you pointed out my mistake with composure and depth. That has forever changed the way I view my work and the people I serve. I deeply regret making you feel disrespected. At the same time, I want to thank you for helping me grow into a better person. I hope you can accept my sincere apology. Once again, I express my deepest gratitude to you, not only for what you have done for our country, but also for the lesson you have taught me. Respectfully. You, Sarah Walker. After pressing send, Sarah felt as if a heavy burden had been lifted from her shoulders. She didn't expect a response, but she hoped that the letter would reach Jack Thompson and leave a positive impression on him. A few days later, Sarah received a reply from Jack. It was brief but profoundly meaningful. Dear M.S. Walker, I received your letter and I greatly appreciate the sincerity in every word you wrote. We all make mistakes at times. What matters is what we learn from them and how we work to make amends. You've done both, and I believe you will not only excel in your work but also inspire others around you. I hold no resentment toward you. On the contrary, I am deeply moved to see how you have grown from this experience. Continue to work with fairness and heart, as that will truly make a difference. Respectfully. Me, Jack Thompson. As Sarah read the letter, her eyes welled with tears. Jack's response wasn't just an act of forgiveness, it was a heartfelt encouragement that would inspire her to carry on with a renewed sense of purpose. A few months later, Skylift Airlines was honored by an independent organization for its bold reforms in customer service. The airline not only regained the trust of its customers but also became a model in the aviation industry for addressing and rectifying mistakes. Jack Thompson continued his role as an advisor on the reform board. He avoided the media spotlight, but his story remained a powerful lesson in respect and grace. Ethan Thompson, satisfied that Skylift was moving in the right direction, stepped back from actively monitoring the airline. He returned to his business ventures, knowing he had contributed to a meaningful change. Sarah Walker, once someone who made a serious mistake, transformed into an inspiration for new flight attendants. She became more than just an employee, she became someone who truly understood the essence of the word service. The story of Major General Jack Thompson is more than just a reminder to honor those who have dedicated their lives to serving the nation. It is a profound lesson in how we treat one another in other everyday lives. From Jack's steadfast composure, Ethan's relentless determination, to Sarah's remorse and transformation, this story demonstrates that mistakes don't have to define us, they can be opportunities to grow and become better. Jack's journey may have come to an end, but the lessons from this story continue to echo. It serves as a call for us all to live with more kindness, fairness, and the courage to correct our wrongs. What are your thoughts on this journey? What lessons have you taken away from this story? Share your thoughts in the comments below and help spread the message of respect and compassion by sharing this story. Don't forget to click like, share, and subscribe so you won't miss more inspiring stories in the future. Your support is our motivation to continue delivering meaningful lessons and inspiration to the community. See you on the next journey.